We cover the latest topics and trends making waves across the sport and chat with our industry's most prominent leaders, so your golf business stays one step ahead. Welcome to Golf Business Live, powered by Club Caddy. Here's NGCOA CEO Jay Caron, and owner of Augusta Ranch Golf Club and secretary of the PGA of America, Don Ray.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 2021 episode of Golf Business Live. I'm Jay Caron, Chief Executive at the National Golf Course Owners Association, and my partner in crime, Don Ray, owner of Augusta Ranch Golf Club in Mesa, Arizona, and Secretary of the PGA of America. Don, how are things in Mesa, Arizona?
Well, I'm in my den right now at my house because we are overseeding the golf course. I got carpet torn up. We're attacking all those deferred maintenance items that I had when golf was struggling, and now it's big. So we're investing in our building and doing some things like that. So got my fancy backdrop from when I was a candidate for secretary, and so I decided to dust it off and pull it up just for this show.
Oh, nice. Are we charging the PGA of America enough in sponsorship for that to be back there? I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I'll probably get an email about it, but that's okay. It's no. Anytime we can show the brand of the PGA of America, I won't charge you for that, Jay.
That's so sweet. All right. You know, today we're going to have on the show a little bit Lou Stagner, who is on Twitter known as the Golf Stat Pro. We're going to talk, well, data and stats, and we've got some interesting questions, things happening right now in the industry, and love to hear what his opinion is on some of this. I know he's got some strong opinions about some really important topics. Which, sometimes I'm surprised how important they seem, and I'll get into that a little bit. But, so to the audience at home watching, don't forget to submit your questions in your chosen channel that you're watching, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So around the industry, Don, there was a little event, I think, last week, the PGA Junior League Golf National Championship. So how did it go? And did I see that Utah, the team from Utah was the champ?
Yeah, first time ever in the championship, and they won it all. And I don't know if you saw some of those interviews. All they talked about was fun. Even the kid who knocked it in there close on the 18th hole, kind of secure the victory. He was talking about trusting, what his coach had told him. So we couldn't be more excited for the industry and obviously for the PGA and all our PGA members, men and women that coach those teams. 64,000 kids played. And this COVID, we had to shut it down during COVID. So, we had to restart it back up. So 64,000 kids, we had 12 teams of 8 players come to Greyhawk Golf Club here in Scottsdale, and they played. And it was so cool to see the shot making. They're really good. But what I started thinking about is, all the kids, like say Augusta Ranch. So, we've got PGA Junior League. We didn't make it through kind of the cities, and we had a great time. But all of those kids that you see playing all-stars in a sense, right? The championship season, they played in the spring season. They played at the fall season, more than likely, at their facilities with kids who were just learning, right? That's the way Little League Baseball works. Heck, that's the way PGA Junior League works. And, I just think about those kids who are probably watching, their friends play for the Utah team and go, he was my partner, in June when we were, or let's just say March or April, when we were playing our little league, our league inside of our facility. So love it. And it's getting more diverse. We had 15 girls playing on the teams. 35% of the players were from diverse backgrounds. So we know that the seeds that we're planting to make this game look more like America is working. And it was just cool to see how happy they were. And that fun was at the center of it, Jay.
So segue on the fun question. I had the good fortune of being at the Ryder Cup at Whistling Straits, and the majors that I attend usually throughout the year and over the years, it's all fun. It's all fun to a certain degree, but there's certainly a level of seriousness when you get to, the PGA Championship, the US Open, the Masters. When you're there, the vibe is kind of serious. It's a little grave, right? But at the Ryder Cup, that gravity is certainly overmatched by the fun atmosphere. I just can't. I'm so excited about how much fuel that gives for that side of our game, to let your hair down a little bit, see these fans go crazy. I know it was a little bit it was still crazy, but it's a little subdued because a lot of the European fans couldn't make it over because of the COVID protocols. But still, it was pretty amazing. I know you had a front row seat to that. So any kind of summary comments about the Ryder Cup itself?
Well, I will tell you, the parents of the Ryder Cup teammates or players are the same as the players or the parents of the PGA Junior League kids. The kids aren't nervous, but the parents are a wreck. And that's whether you're here in Scottsdale, PGA Junior League, or the Ryder Cup. I'll tell you that the coolest thing to me being there at a domestic Ryder Cup for the very first time ever, sun comes up and everybody in the stands is singing the national anthem, of America. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, they roll into God Bless America, which was cool. And then to hear all that noise, it was crazy on the first tee. But before that player hits a shot, you could have heard a quarter drop, and that is cool. So those are my two big impressions of that. It was amazing.
I'm surprised that with that raucous kind of group that you don't have more incidences of, guys or whoever just interrupting the shots, or you never know. I mean, it's like you've got all these people. I guess maybe they all have the same kind of base level of respect for the game that you just don't do that. I mean, you get kicked out, but that stuff. Look at people swinging at each other at Dodgers games and all these NFL football. They're swinging at each other and fighting in the stands. And golf, it gets raucous and then it's silent. There's like a base level respect that still underpins a lot of that, which is kind of interesting to watch.
Well, isn't it? It's a little self-policing because when somebody did say something, everybody would go shh, and really make that person go, okay, I'm sorry, So you have to love golf. If that just doesn't, if America could act more like golf, we'd be all right. We need golf to look more like America, no doubt about it. But if America could act like golf, man, it'd be pretty cool.
You're right. Well, a couple of other industry issues I want to touch on before we bring our guest on. One is just labor around this industry. I know as a course operator and owner, I'm sure you're having your issues finding and keeping staff, but I'm hearing more and more and more, almost as a crisis. It's been that way in the service industry since COVID began, certainly. But are you hearing through the PGA, through your own operations and your network, just this acute crisis of a shortage of labor, both on the agronomy side and the service side?
Well, I don't think the golf industry is immune to it, right? I think we're facing it just like everybody else. I certainly at Augusta Ranch, like I had mentioned before, we've kept a lot of our food and beverage staff during some really slow times at the golf course because we know we're going to need them as soon as we open from overseeding next week. I'll tell you what just hit me, though, is Cisco is our provider of all of our food and beverage stuff. We have a huge event this Saturday at the golf course. We have Oktoberfest with beer steins and everything, expecting 500 people on our range. And Cisco says that they can't deliver anymore. And their operation's a good 45 minutes away from my facility. So there's no way I can get frozen food stuff over. So we're going to a restaurant depot down the street. And so they basically, if you're not in the top 20% of their accounts, they're not delivering to you. So I thought we were doing okay, but it turned out our providers aren't doing so well. So that is the most serious thing that I've experienced so far for whatever the reasons are. You can blame it on vaccination, you can blame it on unemployment insurance, you can blame it on all that stuff. All I know is no trucks are coming to Augusta Ranch right now to deliver lettuce and chicken wings, which is not good.
Wow. I wonder if there's a way to band together with some local businesses to up the purchase order, and maybe have a one drop ship place, one shipment place, and all the local businesses come together to capitalize on that. That might be something to explore.
Yeah, I was telling a buddy we should just go buy a reefer truck and just fire it up and go over there and start delivering. We'd make a killing. Maybe more than the golf course would make. But we are kind of working. I talked to some golf clubs in my area saying, what do you have? What do you need? I've got some extra stuff. Turns out some of the clubs have a boatload of Gatorade. It's hard to get Gatorade right now. We're trying to do that, but you don't have that crowdsourcing site to make it happen like Accelerate, right?
Yeah. Well, on the labor issue, Ronnie Miles did put out some information to golf course owners last week about the work opportunity tax credit. So those that are looking to hire, there are a lot of dollars on the table if you hire people from certain segments of the population, like veterans, disabled veterans, disadvantaged, people that are living in certain zones in areas around the country, long-term unemployed, even former felons, that there are tax credits available to you as a business. So, please dig that up on Accelerate or look in your emails for those. emails from Ronnie Miles about those issues that might help you out. Also something that's percolating, and this has been a perennial issue certainly, and you're no stranger to this being out in the desert area, is the LA Times just published an article about a week ago, or maybe 4 or 5 days ago, about the Coachella Valley in California, and just the headline was, golf course uses 1 million gallons of water per night. That was the headline of the article, and then it dives into the water issues, right? And it was a fairly balanced piece. Craig Kessler, our good friend Craig, was able to be interviewed for it, which was very helpful because he's the most knowledgeable man on the universe about, golf and water and so forth. But it's just, there's a water crisis. It's a federal emergency crisis out there in the West. And, I'm hearing folks wanting to circle the wagons here and really get organized, because this could be an existential crisis that we keep pushing off and keep pushing off. Do you feel like we're in a different place right now as far as the water issue than we are every year that this comes up? But do you feel like we're in any different place now that deserves a better coordinated response from the golf industry?
Absolutely. Because the facts just don't prove it out. I mean, in Palm Springs, the underground aquifers there, they'll tell you that they're never going to run out of water in Palm Springs. But yet you look at Palm Springs and go, how do they water all those golf courses? But that's just not what the facts say. So absolutely, Jay. I mean, that's why We Are Golf and National Golf Day is so critical. It's going to be in person this year. That's where everybody should sign up. I think you're going to see a lot more of the PGA there, which is very exciting to me, because the more constituents we can have in front of those legislators to talk about, we raise more money for charity than all the other sports combined. We are the best stewards of water. I don't know about all the states, but here in Arizona, we use less than 3% of the water, yet we're an over $4 billion economic impact to the state. So we have to have some of that parrot knowledge, some of those quick speaking points that we can give to those non-golfers, because when only 8% of the golfers, only 8% of the population plays golf, those rumors start coming in and everybody's like, oh yeah, golf courses use all kinds of water. There are times, that is a fact, that some golf courses might use 1 million gallons in one night. That's true. But let's put it in the whole context of the story instead of pulling it out as a headline to stir up people. So if we're not talking, no one's going to listen. They're just going to listen to who's talking. So we got to start talking, Jay.
And I think, I wonder if we can start talking in terms of net use, because you might pump 1 million gallons of water, but how much of that gets back into the ecosystem through evaporation, through the groundwater and runoff and so forth, where how much water is being used that does not make it back into the ecosystem, right? So there's a net use maybe that we should be talking about, and our impact might even be lower than that percentage you're talking about.
No doubt. In effluent water, let's be honest, the salts in effluent water, in order for a water treatment plant to get that water to a certain level, I mean, to get it to human consumption, that's costs a lot of money. But to get it to grass consumption, and we'll take that water, and to know that they keep charging more and more and more for this effluent water, when we're the ones who are filtering it for free and providing this tax revenue to any city and state, I wish they'd look at it in terms of that. But once again, we just got to get the knowledge out there so that our army of golfers out there can spread the word.
You're right. And in fact, I mean, golf has been, our star has been on the rise for the last 2 years. We know that, right? But these articles still pop up. There was some sports editor at a newspaper out in Ohio, a sports editor that was just basically saying golf needs to go away as, land use and all of this. Are like, oh man, so we're going to be, fighting these battles, I think, forever, but thankfully those are few and far between compared to what they used to be out there in the media. So golf's goodness is coming through in so many ways.
We are the engine of good. And I didn't see any of those kids playing PGA Junior League with the helmet on. They were having a good time getting their 2,000 steps, right? And you tell that to the veterans who play Augusta Ranch. I got them out of their house. The suicide rate's going down on behalf of PGA and LPGA members teaching PGA Hope programs and all the other veterans programs. You're telling them we're not good for mental health, physical health, and family health? Absolutely we are. So we just got to tell that darn story.
Yeah, you're right. And the last stat I want to mention about from the golf industry is our friends at Pellucid and their Golf Market Research Center just kind of published a few stats about the performance in 2021 and how that some of the most important metrics are up considerably. Like golf revenue it's up over 2020 and an amazing 50% over 19 just on the golf revenue. That's an enormous growth. That rounds contributed 14% of that and rate 6%. So which is great, just to see this. Jim Copenhaver said that weather really didn't contribute anything this particular year, but utilization is up 73%, up 12 points. And I think this percentage of achieved green fee, I guess what they look at is how much are people discounting rounds in order to bring up, the demand. And he basically saying that that we're not buying growth through discounting, that owners have done a great job with healthy rates in order to achieve that revenue increase. We're not just getting it through cheaper golf in that sense. So that's good. So we're looking pretty good this year, and Jim's thinking we have a shot at matching the 2020 rounds number by the end of the year, which everybody was asking, are we going to see? Are we going to see a COVID hangover, and are the numbers going to go back or whatever? But we're holding the line, and I often ask, are we at a new plateau? And that may be the case, but the question is that you and I try to address on almost every show, but we won't today, is how do we keep it? How do we keep it going? How do we leverage this exuberance for the game and just move forward and lift it even more? So, and that's happening. That is happening around the country, but we can't rest on our laurels. That is for sure.
No, but expenses aren't going down. I mean, my seed cost $26,000 last year. This year it's $56,000. So the delta between those two, I saw some golfer blog the other day going, oh, golf's going to be so expensive this year. They're raising their prices already. Easy. We're not taking advantage of anything. We're just trying to keep that delta the same because expenses are going higher. Labor's gone higher. So, we're still trying to provide amazing course conditions for everybody who loves golf, but the expense delta is we're getting squeezed on that. So once again, we just got to tell our story, because I don't know if there's no golf course owner who's really greedy. They want to make a living. They want to employ a bunch of people. They love going to work at a golf course. But now all of a sudden we have a little bit of pricing power and they're mad. But by the way, I've probably done about $60,000 in capital improvements at Augusta Ranch in the last 45 days.
Over time, we looked at the consumer price index over the last 20 years and how everything creeps up. The price of a cup of coffee, whatever it is that people are spending money on in their lives. And you look at the average green fee has not kept up by any stretch of the imagination with the consumer price index. So you can make the argument that golf is cheaper than it was 20 years ago, and in that sense, compared to everything else that people are paying for. So easy up, easy customers. We're just trying to stay alive and stay healthy. You have to have capital to be able to do those things that you want at the golf course. So, there's a balance that we're striking, and the balance is moving upwards a little bit, and that's necessary. But so last couple of points before we bring Lou on. One is last week, Don, we hosted here in Charleston the Lead Golf Together Summit. It was the industry's first ever event focused squarely on diversity at the leadership table in golf. There is so much good work happening in the golf industry to increase diversity, equity, inclusion in the marketplace, like golfers and the workforce and all of these things. And it's been great. The PGA is very, very involved. And but the leadership table remains 97% white and male. And talk about a delta, between America and what it looks like in the leadership table. And so we had the USGA, the Tour, PGA of America, LPGA, IAGA, GCSA, a lot of great organizations in Charleston last week. And also leaders of grassroots organizations like Black Girls Golf, Ted Rhodes Foundation, and many other organizations together in the room probably for the first time, literally in the room together. And so it was a wonderful 2 days that we spent kind of brainstorming about what it takes to improve the diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. And at the end of the day, just like a game of golf, Don, this connected people. This is a relationship game and it's a relationship business. And so when these folks get to know each other, then deals can be struck. Progress can be made. So we're very, very fortunate that they were able to put on this event, and we'll see what happens moving forward. And thanks to the PGA for being involved and sending some good people to that event. And we had Jim Beatty on our show a couple of months ago, just a great chat about what needs to be done in this industry. So I know you weren't there, Don, but I know you knew about it. And
I would have been there. I would. I mean, PGA Junior League, it's a big deal for obviously our association. We believe it's a big deal for golf in and of itself because it's growing golf. But you're right. So bummed that we couldn't be there. I know we were all disappointed. Jim, John, and I, and Seth, John Easterbrook. So next year, count us in. We want to be there. Obviously, we sent some representatives there, but. I'm with you. I'm glad to see us being intentional about things like that. We talk about inviting versus welcoming. I mean, it takes members calling somebody saying, you should run for the board. I don't know. You have to run for the board. Nothing like getting the invite that way. So let's be intentional about that. so that, and I know we're growing up leaders. It's just going to take a while for them to be ready for those board seats. So we're going to have to be intentional to get some people to come on over. And I think it's great. You see Renee Powell, she's on a lot of different boards and just speaking the truth.
Yeah.
And God bless her, right? She's just doing so many great things on all the different boards she's on. And we just need a lot more Renee Powells.
Yep. We had Renee Powell there at the event. We had Sheila Johnson, Ray Halbritter, Jim Clyburn joined us. It was a really, really great affair. So yesterday, I think it was, or maybe it was today, the Golf Business Weekly came out, and Harvey Silverman had an article. I just got to say this one last thing. It was on how many POS systems is too many, right? He did this little analysis, said in 2015, the PGA Expo, there were 12 POS systems at the show. In 2020, there were 12 POS systems at the show. So how many is too many? Wondering, nobody's really, just what's happening in this marketplace. And so I guess the answer, Harvey, is 13. 13 must be too many. So there you go. I've answered your question. All right. So speaking of stats, let us bring onto the show Lou Stagner, on Twitter known as the Golf Stat Pro. Hello, Lou. How are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me today.
Excellent. So, I had to look far and wide for your bio, and it was right there on your Twitter page. Lou is now the Arcos Data Insights lead. We're going to talk about that in a minute. He's co-host of Hack It Out Golf podcast. He's a dad, he's a husband, he's a golf nut, and a data nerd. Now, I'm sure you can prioritize those. I'll bet husband and dad rises to the top there.
Sure,
but,
absolutely. Right.
Oh, yeah. So we love to have nerds on this show because we dive into topics, right? And by the way, nerds have inherited the earth. Right? Remember back in the day when it was the jocks? You remember what was that show? Revenge of the Nerds. The jocks ruled the world. Today, 30 years later, the nerds are inheriting this earth, which is great because I was a nerd myself as a kid. So welcome to the nerd. John, were you a nerd or were you a jock?
I was both, actually. I had both groups, and I had to jump from group to group, So I was in computer class when there were Apple IIe's out there, and I was programming on COBOL. And then I was also on the baseball team. So believe me, it was a tough grinding.
Oh man, nerdy jock. That's why you are where you are. The nerdy jocks make it to the top. Well, Lou, so professionally, you just came on board at Arcos, right? And so, and that's news. But tell us about your professional career, a little bit about yourself, and how you became known as the Golf Stat Pro on Twitter.
Yeah, sure. So I still have a day job in corporate America. I work for a very large privately held company, and I'm the director of analytics there. And I run a team that works on everything from simple reporting to machine learning and everything in between. And a few years ago, I'd been messing around with golf data for many years with my own game on the professional game. And I told my wife I was going to start a blog on golf analytics. And her immediate response was, "You are so much fun at parties." And so I started this blog with absolutely no intention of it turning into anything. And I quickly got some attention and grew a follower base and ended up meeting a lot of different people and worked with Scott Fawcett for a while, who created Decade. Recently went over to Arcos, and I'm now part of Arcos on a part-time basis. And the Golf Stat Pro moniker actually came from my daughter. So I started this blog and I needed a URL for the website. And I was trying to come up with names, and my daughter came up with the name, and that's why it's there. And it would be tough for me to remove that from Twitter, seeing that the name originated with my daughter.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So, even though this really wasn't set up to be a commercial for Arcos, I want you to tell us about Arcos, what they do and what their value proposition is to the golfer, and maybe even to the golf course owner, who's our primary audience.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I joined Arcos, the data insights lead, and Arcos is they're the leader in the industry as far as collecting stats on the golf course. And the biggest value proposition that they provide to the golfer is making it very easy and very straightforward to collect your stats, which is very important for any level of player. And they need good stats so that they can understand the parts of their game that they need to work on. Without having good information, it's very challenging for a player to know what they need to work on. There's a professional player, Justin Rose, you've probably heard of him, and he went to his coach and he started up with a new coach and said, "Coach, I'm a bad wedge player. I need to get better." And the coach went and looked at the stats and said, "You are one of the best 3 wedge players on the PGA Tour. What are you talking about?" And I'm not picking on Justin in any way, but using him as an example to show that we all have confirmation bias around our game, and what we think is going on isn't generally what's really going on. So having actual stats to quantify what you're doing on the golf course can allow you to focus on a plan to get better. You can use that information along with your coach, and together you can come up with a plan on how you want to improve, which is what most of us want to do and what most of us need to do. As far as how we can use that information for golf course owners, it's a really interesting conversation. So I've only been there a few weeks now, but we've already had a couple of chats around that and things that are possibilities for golf course owners. I don't know if I can let the cat out of the bag on what it might be just yet, but it's definitely a conversation that's happening internally to see how owners and superintendents can leverage the information that Arccos has, which is expansive. When I first got into their database, they have nearly 500 million shots. It's the largest collection of on-course shot information in the world. And to have access to that, to play around with it, is kind of a data nerd's dream.
That's really cool. I noticed on the Arccos site, though, it says that those golfers that use the device, maybe the one that you put at the end of the club, I assume, are 5 times more likely to hit a hole-in-one. How is that derived? How were they able to determine that 5 times more likely? And by the way, what are the odds even at 5x?
Yeah, I don't know how they put that one together, to be honest, but I know the odds of a hole-in-one are pretty high, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say somebody that is going to leverage Arccos for their game, they are probably looking to get better, and they probably want to go about it in an intelligent and effective way, using all that data to get better. So anyone that's working hard on getting better at their game is probably going to be more likely to get better and do good things. So I can't tell you the exact calculation there, but that's kind of my off the cuff response.
You should ask the folks there, that the actuaries inside there, is it causation or correlation? Because you're right, because if you have a bell curve of golfers and you take the entire bell curve, like what the probability is of a hole-in-one, and that's going to be whatever it is. And then it's really this section, though, of the golfers on this side of the bell curve that are using Arccos or that interested. They're probably better. They're probably dialed in. They're more likely. Are they 3 times more likely to get a hole-in-one just naturally? And then usage of Arccos bumps that up to 5. Yeah, I'm sure you're probably laying awake at night trying to think about these things.
Yeah, one quick hole-in-one stat I do know that's really fun is I don't remember exactly what the probability is for a PGA Tour professional to make a hole-in-one, but I will tell you that they are more likely to make a hole-in-one than to hit all 18 greens in a round of golf. So every time I put that out there, that kind of blows people's minds, and it is kind of crazy to think about it. So they're more likely to have an ace than they are to hit all 18 greens in a round.
Oh my gosh, that is shocking. Yeah. But it's a great stat. Wow, like as you always say, moderate expectations, right? In your Twitter feed, you're always talking about that these guys are good and they're excellent, but they do miss, and they're not hitting, within 20 feet 80% of the time from X number of yards. And don't beat yourself up if you're not doing it yourself, and
right.
What have you. So that's really interesting. Now, I got to ask you though, like, what percentage of amateur golfers do you think are really data obsessed? I see systems and tech like Arccos that are designed to give you more and more and more information about your swing, your ball flight, the spin. But how many golf nerds truly care about this stuff, and how many people would rather see, let's say, 2 bits of data, because they just can't process that much? I'm I'm reminded of Malcolm Gladwell's book. I think it was Tipping Point. There was a story about emergency room doctors, and when they were presented with more information about the situation that they're triaging in the moment, that they performed worse when they had more information. It was too much, and they couldn't figure out and distill it quickly enough to get to the essential. Where, when I think of myself on the golf course, I'm thinking probably 2 or 3 bits of data are filtering through my head before I, decide what club I'm going to use, what my swing is going to be. So how much is too much information and might actually cause paralysis or not, might hurt performance.
Yeah, I think that is really player dependent. But what I think, as somebody who's worked in corporate America and analytics for a long time, multiple decades, and someone that is charged with delivering actionable and useful information to decision makers around the organization, that same issue exists in that environment as well. And you can't remove information completely from the equation and not give them anything. So you have to give them something that's useful, that fits within what works for them. And everybody's different. And I think that's one of the things that Arcos is doing really well, is they are delivering varying levels of information to the player. There's some players that want to dive into every last detail, and they want to know everything they can possibly know about every swing they've ever taken. And then there's other players that want some high level information that is directionally correct with their game and helps them to understand maybe what they might need to work on, what they're doing really well. But it's multiple levels for different personalities, if that makes sense. So I think that's one of the other value propositions of Arcos, is delivering different levels of info for different types of personalities. Hopefully that makes sense the way I described that.
Yeah, sure it does. You're commenting on Twitter all the time on all these stats. You're an amateur guy. You're working a daytime job in corporate America. Where do you get this information, and how are you privy to the level of detail that you report out on and synthesize?
Yeah, so as someone that has worked and works with tour pros, I get access to the data. And so that's where I'm able to get all the PGA Tour data. And now that I'm part of Arcos, I have the largest collection of on-course data there is in the world, from every level, +5 amateurs all the way up to 30 handicaps and everything in between. So I'm lucky to have access to all of this info, and I get to do some really fun things and cool stuff with it.
Excellent. I know Don is a data geek as well, but on the golf course operations side, and like the PGA of America and others are kind of fighting for this space on getting more data into the hands of golf course operators. What do you think? Don, I want you to ask some questions too from the operator side, but I'm just thinking you do a lot of information on tour players versus amateurs and those kinds of stats. What do you think are some of the most consequential pieces of data from the standard golfer, the average Joe golfer, that golf course owners really should know about, that would be illuminating to them?
Well, I think so. If I take off my hat of trying to help golfers play better, and I put on my hat of trying to help a golf course owner or a superintendent do their job better, I start to think around things like, where are golf balls ending up? And I would try to maybe find opportunities to maybe remove a bunker, realizing some bunkers are maybe there for aesthetically pleasing purposes and they're not necessarily there to get in the way. I would look for opportunities to remove certain bunkers if nobody's using them. I would look for opportunities to find where a lot of my golf balls are going on certain holes in certain situations. And I would maybe look to make sure that rough in that part is maybe a little bit lower, because I'm interested in pace of play. I would maybe expand fairway in that part because I'm interested in pace of play. I would maybe look at some situations where we've all played golf courses where there's a tee box and 30 yards off the tee box there's a fairway, and fairway costs significantly more to maintain than rough in certain parts of the country. And I would maybe identify opportunities to maybe pinch back how much fairway I'm maintaining in that spot, and maybe take that acreage that I'm saving in fairways right off the tee box and maybe make it wider in certain parts for the mid-handicap type player, parts of the golf course that really wouldn't affect an elite player or a better player. Mm-hmm. And I would do that all around trying to understand pace of play and make that better. I would look for, use the data to potentially find backup situations. And there's a book that I read, you guys probably know Bill Yates, who passed away a few years ago. He wrote a book, Out of Time, I think is what it was called. And he talks about flow on the golf course. And it would be really interesting to use data to understand that flow on the golf course. And there's situations where, making a golf hole harder would actually improve your pace of play because it's going to remove the backup on the next hole. And there's situations around that. So if I was a golf course owner, those are the kind of things I would be interested in looking at from a data perspective.
And Don, as an operator, how would you harvest that kind of data at your facility if you felt like that would help you make better operational decisions?
I got so much in my head right now of thinking about the data, because one, I got 3 areas. I'll do them real fast. One, I truly, everybody, you try to give a lesson to somebody. They're like, what do you want to work on? That's like everybody used to say. They always want to work on their driver. That's what they want to work on. But what they need to work on is other things. I will tell you, and I don't have the data to prove it, but I just got a bunch of happy women at Augusta Ranch now, is that when we overseeded some of our fairways, because we saw the carry distance isn't where everybody thinks it is. And so some of our ladies were never even getting the carry distance to get into the ryegrass that we were overseeding. And as we kind of lengthened some fairways out, oh my gosh, they were so happy, because Dormant Bermuda tends to get a little soggy out there. Ryegrass is a little bit better. So that was a big deal. So, what are you overseeding, and learn and understand what the carry distances are of the personas of maybe the 4 or 5 people that play your golf course, I think is key. And then certainly pace of play. You are exactly right. I mean, I hate it when I go out to the starter and he or she's like, I got to head on the tee, Don. I shoved a bunch of people out. And I'm like, no, it's like a freeway, bro. The reason there's a traffic light is because if everybody goes off every 7 or 8 minutes, it's smoother out there. You shoving people onto hole number 1 just caused a headache on hole number 5. And then I always see, the morning kind of ambassador, we call them outside servers. So we call them ambassadors. Some call them marshals and rangers. But the front 9 person is always hanging out going, everything's going great. And they're in the morning, and they work in the morning. And the afternoon is when you really see what happened in the morning. Because while they were just kicking it and not making sure that everybody was playing where we wanted them to play and as fast, because they will say, well, I'm doing all right. But we found at Augusta Ranch, and you'll love this, Lou, because this is data. When I got the job at Eagle Mountain, I knew exactly what ambassador pairs working together had the best pace of plays. I found out that regardless, I lost 25 minutes throughout the day because of beverage cart stops, trying to get 2 per 9, and just whatever was going on. And so that first tee time, our time par was 4 hours and 20 minutes at the golf club at Eagle Mountain. But if that first group didn't play in 4, I would easily be at 5 hours by the time I got to the afternoon. So the first pace of play groups, pace of play is not for the whole day. Your pace of play or your time par has to be different in the morning, because you will lose time throughout. So, man, if you could give me more of that, Lou, that data, Lou, that'd be, maybe you are a data, Lou. That should be
like I think there's so much that
great.
can be done around that with pace of play. And I know that it's expensive to maintain a golf course. And I know that a lot of golf courses are not, cutting their rough every day. And so they'll cut their rough, and then they'll go a certain period of time, and they'll come back and they'll cut the rough again. And like when I, look at the data and think about the data, there are probably targeted areas where you could cut more often in the rough. And what's interesting is like with Arcos, they're tracking like where players are moving around on the golf course. And I know there are other systems out there like that people have on their carts, and they know where people are traveling on the carts. And I'm guessing you will see an uptick in how long it takes somebody to find the ball 3 days after you've cut the rough. On the day you've cut the rough, it's probably going to be a lot shorter time to find the ball. And 3 days after, before you're ready for your next cut, it's going to take longer because the grass has grown over 3 days. And so I look at that, and if you could target certain areas where a lot of golf balls end up and do a targeted cut of the rough, you could not have to spend all that money to cut all of your rough every time, but you could really help to impact pace of play by having the rough be shorter in areas where a lot of golf balls are going to be for that, mid-handicap-ish type player.
Yeah, no doubt. That happened at the golf club at Eagle Mountain. The rough was always mowed at about 1.5 inches on the side, so the ball would never kick down off these box canyons. We lowered the rough height so the ball would kick down back in the fairway, and pace of play went up like 7.5 minutes or something.
Yeah,
it was ridiculous
amazing.
just by changing 1/2 inch on the mow cut. So wow, you're on top of it. You're exactly right.
There are a lot of systems out there, to your point, Lou, that are going to feed that data, whether it's the GPS system on the carts or the tag marshal system that I saw in use at Erin Hills a couple of weeks ago as well. I'm sure there's a way to figure out where people are hitting, and because they walk and they stop here for 3 minutes, so they know that's where they hit the ball, and and what have you. So the data out there, I think the body of knowledge is probably enormous. I mean, USGA even, I don't know, 5 years ago came up with this Deacon program where they're trying to analyze where the golfers are going and where they're not going so that they can give advice to the superintendents on, like you said, take this out of play. Is that a superfluous bunker over there? Really, nobody ever hits into it, so is it worth keeping for aesthetic reasons, et cetera? So we have more information to say than we ever had in the history of this industry. And the key here is synthesizing it in consumable ways so that owners and operators can see the information and have actionable information out of it, right? I mean, that's really the key here, is taking that data and making it usable.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that Arcos has been looking at, and I hope to be a part of that going forward to untangle some of these things and figure out how golf courses can operate better. And when golf courses operate better, it's a better experience for the player, and when it's a better experience for the player, we're happier whether we play good or we play bad. Mm-hmm. So there has to be this connection between golfer and facility and making the best experience possible. And I think we can leverage data in ways to help not only owners and superintendents but the players.
I got one for you guys. I have to. So my lake on number 10, there's just a lot of sediment in the water, so you can't see the bottom. So there's no fishing for golf balls. There's no older golfer fishing for golf balls for 5 minutes. On the front nine, on the ninth hole, that lake's always clear. That's how we pump the water onto the golf course. Guys fish for like 3 to 5 minutes. It's killing my pace of play.
Don, you need to stock
fishing for balls.
You need to stock that lake with crocodiles. They'll stop fishing for balls real fast.
I'll put dye in the water so they can't see the bottom, because if they see that Pro V1 17 feet deep, they pull the full extension out on their little ball retriever and they're grabbing it, dude. It's killing my pace.
That's great.
Killing it.
Oh, so this week, I'm not gonna. We be stepping on a landmine here, but it was just today or yesterday, USGA announces that limit on the 46-inch driver, and what's behind that is distance. Why, Lou? Why so much obsession over distance? Why do you think there's so much obsession over this?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't understand why we are worried about distance and why the USGA is worried about distance. They started the Tee It Forward campaign back in 2011 because a significant portion of the population is playing tee boxes that are too long for their skill level. It's something that I tweet about often, encouraging people to move up and play it forward, tee it forward, like the campaign. And since that campaign started in 2011, amateur driving distance is pretty much unchanged. They're maybe a yard longer than they were in 2011. So I don't understand why there is a concern around distance for 99.5% of the golfers that are out there. It doesn't really add up for me.
Now, do you think they are concerned about that, or is the concern, because what we see is what I call golf Hollywood? You got Phil commenting on this stuff, and you got they are the ones that are chiming in saying, crying foul and all these things, when it's the amateur golfer. Like you said, this is not consequential to them. So why is there the obsession at that level?
Well, I mean, it's more than just those folks. I mean, Mike Davis, I have the quote right in front of me here. It says, the research conducted through Distance Insight clearly shows that hitting distances have consistently increased through time, and if left unchecked, could threaten the long-term future of our game at every level and every golf course in which it is played, that's just patently false. If you actually read the USGA Distance Insight report and all of the sub-reports, which I've read every single one of them, some of them more than once, all of the data in there shows that distance is not an issue at any level of golf using their own data. And someone like Thomas Pagel, who is, I forget his title, he's a senior director of governance at the USGA. He's been on podcasts where he's said the same thing. Distance is a problem at every level. And the numbers do not support that. And it baffles me that that kind of information is being put out there, because as a golf course owner, like there's always this I have to lengthen my golf course to keep up. And on a podcast, Thomas Pagel said something along the lines of, there's this perception that distance is a problem. And the USGA will say that distance is a problem, and they're creating that perception that distance is a problem. And then a golf course owner operator will say, well, I better lengthen my tee boxes because everyone else is, and I don't want to get left behind. And it puts golf course owners in really challenging spots. And when you look at the actual data, nobody's hitting it too far. We need amateurs to hit the ball farther. They don't hit it far enough is the problem. And so to me, I don't understand the whole path that they're going down. It doesn't make any sense to me, to be honest.
I think what we're going to find, because they're doing their Distance Insights project and there's still so much work going on, is that we're having two conversations in the same context here. It's that amateur game. And, and I also tell my friends at the USGA, like, nobody's building courses anymore. So the conversation about lengthening courses is really almost over now. It's about actually maybe even shortening some of the courses and tightening it up and so forth. So I think the conversation is away from the length of the courses, because we're not in the construction boom like we were in the 90s, where you had to be over 7,000 in order to say whatever you wanted to say about your course, right? I think we've kind of transcended that as far as making them longer. I just don't see that happening out there. That being said, though, you've got at the tour level this conversation. It's a very different one, right? Because they're trying to figure out how do we contain or leverage or use or work with the guys that are now hitting it nearly 400 yards. You got someone like Phil Mickelson, who said this, calling the USGA, what is it? Stupid is as stupid does, and all this kind of stuff about this. But here's what I think is that. And maybe I'm playing the middle ground here, is that, right or wrong, as far as decisions are making, the USG and the RNA, in my opinion, they feel the responsibility of the game across the globe and over the long arc of history. That's what their duty of care is. And, and then you got someone who's all about hitting bombs, and that's, and how this is an outrage at that level at the same time. And so you got to, and I know the guys at the USGA, pretty well. And so how do you reconcile this care for the long term, the next 100 years? Because I think they feel any little change will have this cascading effect possibly on the game, right? And so they're very careful in what they do when they make changes. So I'm sure they studied this for 4 or 5 years about the driver distance, right? So do you think it's just, hey, let the guys hit bombs and don't worry about all this stuff? Or do you think there's at least a duty of care there that needs to be recognized for, on the history and the integrity of this game overall?
So I would ask, what do you mean by the integrity of the game? What does that mean?
Well, like, for example, that we're all playing the same game. And that's one of the nicest things about golf versus like maybe some other sports, is that we have to use the same equipment rules. We have to play by the same actual rule book, equipment standards, all of that up and down the entire level, right? It's like the integrity of that, I think, it was what's happened. They're trying to maintain the amateur golfer and getting them to push to the ends of the ability to hit the ball as long as possible, but at the same time, keep it in the ballpark, so to speak, with maybe the elite player, and so that we all can continue to follow that pretty wonderful thing that's unique about our sport, that we're all following the same rules, right?
I mean, we do follow the same rules, but we're not playing the same game. I mean, they're literally the best few hundred players on the planet.
That's the challenge.
I would never, yeah, but I would never compare myself to LeBron. I would never expect to be able to play basketball as well as LeBron. I would never compare myself to Josh Allen. I'm never going to be able to throw a football like Josh Allen. Can I throw a football? Sure. Can I throw it like Josh Allen when there's 300 pounders running at me at 4.4 speed? No, absolutely not. So I think there's a huge disconnect between the best players on the planet and the rest of us, and most of us fall into the rest of us bucket. Mm-hmm. And to make globally sweeping changes for a few hundred players seems odd to me. I mean, I certainly wouldn't do it that way. And if you just look at the PGA Tour, they're not playing 8,000 yard courses. Since 2019, almost 25% of the rounds that they've played have been at under 7,000 yards. So it's not like they're playing these 8,000 plus yard courses. Only 5% of the rounds since 2019 have been played at 7,600 yards or longer. And those are generally, major championships. So, we're not seeing this massive expanse of golf courses for those players. And we're in a situation where most of the time they're playing it well shorter than the yardage on the scorecard. And they're still, the scoring is relatively similar to what it was 40 years ago. Is it better? Sure, it's definitely better, but it's not like we've reached this point of no return, and it's a different game than it was 40 years ago, at least in my opinion.
Do you think there's an underlying fear that the difference that you talked about, it's minor? Do you think there's a fear that difference will accelerate and get larger and larger sooner?
Well, there's regulations on equipment currently, so we have those in place, and so any gain that you see right now is through optimization of other factors, either through the athlete or through understanding better launch conditions. Using something like TrackMan or GC Quad to optimize launch conditions. But as far as the performance of the club itself, those regulations are in place, and manufacturers can't come out with equipment that exceed the regulations that are currently in place. So that's why we've really seen kind of a plateau since 2002, 2003. Everything's generally kind of flattened out. We've seen a little bit of uptick over the last 4 or 5 years. And a lot of that is from us better understanding the importance of distance. And that's one thing that's really fundamentally changed about the game is there was always this overemphasis on accuracy at the expense of distance. And now we understand it's a lot more important to be longer. And so one, players are making those adjustments. And two, there's also this difference where players are not just simply increasing their maximum distance. They're hitting the ball longer in more situations. So you'll see on the shorter holes where players are hitting it a lot farther on shorter holes than they ever used to, where in the past they would always lay up in those situations and they weren't going for it, so to speak. And so strategy has fundamentally changed and shifted what we know and what we think. And so we're just kind of adapting to that. I think the game would have been significantly different, 20 or 30 years ago, if players understood how important distance was and weren't putting way too much emphasis on, hitting it shorter and keeping the ball in the fairway. If hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. You talked about the Tee It Forward campaign and, getting folks, the amateur golfers, to really play the right set of tees for that enjoyment level. And, there have been like the longleaf pine system and other, there are multiple systems out now to try to get people to do that. And Don, you're a course operator, PGA professional. I'd like both of your opinions on this, is that there's something still special about the golf experience when the four of you are standing on the same tee together. And you might be waiting a minute, for the next group. You're socializing there. You're kind of there together. And then there's ego that also is in play with all of this. So breaking up the players to play multiple sets of tees changes possibly some of the culture and reality of the game of being together at the same tee box, right? And to see each other drive and do all that. So, what would you suggest that operators and owners do to help people overcome that, and to say, yeah, you should split up. Hey, Joe, you need to play the silver tees, and Don, you need to play the blue tees, and what have you, when people are, I think psychologically, they're like, I don't know if I want to do that, So how do we get over that, knowing or believing that if they did play the right set of tees, it would yield more enjoyment. More enjoyment means retention and coming back and so forth, right? So how do you break through?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm either the perfect person to answer this question or the worst. Lou, my golf course is 4,000 yards. That's it. All 18. That's what I got. And 52,000 people played on, or 52,000 rounds were played last year. One of my favorite tournaments is we do a 2-day event with men and women and boys and girls. And on the second day of the event, we repair them by score. Inevitably, there's a 7, 8, maybe 12-year-old playing with a 65-year-old man or woman, all playing the same golf course. To me, when the golf course is shorter, it brings everybody together because no longer is distance such an advantage of getting it down there. So I see it every day at Augusta Ranch at 4,000 yards at golf. I'm not going out of business because distance is an issue. Matter of fact, I'm busy because people want to play faster. To answer your question about the different tee boxes, I do like the fact that the bunny slope is right next to the black diamond. Otherwise on a ski slope, you never see everybody who's learned how to ski because they're on the bunny. But at golf, I can do that. So I think, handicaps, great idea, to make sure you're you're playing on an equine. Nobody can do that. Bowling maybe has a shot, but I love the fact that I can play with Katie and Karen, and we can actually make that last 3-footer mean something. But I think the tee boxes things, I think it's just a matter of going up with that group. I think even in a pro-am, I'm always going to go up with the amateurs and see what they're going to do. If I'm playing with a woman, I'm going to go up to, if she's playing a shorter tee box, I'm going to go up there with her so that we're talking and I'm seeing where her ball went. I think it's just a matter of the clubs you're hitting into greens. And Lou, you got the numbers better than I do, but to me, I think that's where the inequity is they're hitting wedges into greens on the tour. And if you try to play those yardages, you're not going to hit wedge into these greens. And so play the tee box that's appropriate to you. So I did like the tee forward campaign because I think tee boxes is part of the answer. It doesn't have to be clicks on each tee box, Jay. It's a matter of somebody in that group going, okay, let's play this tee box, and then let's move up to the next one together. And it's just a matter of community. So yardage, I laughed at, when we talked about it in the PJ boardroom when I was on the board 4 years ago. I said, I say we roll back the ball 50%. Because then I could host a major at Augusta Ranch with my 4,000 yards. Roll it back. That's what I say, Lou. Roll it back.
That's great. That would be amazing to have a major at a 4,000 yard course. That'd be awesome. How do you overcome that, Jay? I mean, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of ego involved sometimes, and I'm not sure why that is. And I've played with far too many players where they will want to play the tips or near the tips, and they hit the ball 210 yards off the tee and they want to play it from 6,800 yards, and it's just way too much golf course for them, and they can rarely reach anything in regulation, and they're hitting 3-woods for approach shots all day into par 4s, and that just, to me, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, and that's really not what the game should be. There should be a variety, and if you are constantly hitting 3-wood as an approach shot on every par 4 you play or every par 3 you play, you're probably playing the wrong tees. And a rule of thumb that I use is around scoring. If you are not breaking 80 at least 20% of the time from the tee boxes you're playing, move up and keep moving up until you're breaking 80 20% of the time. And I think that's it's arbitrary. I made that up, but I think it's decent advice for people because there's far too many people playing the golf course from far too long, and how you get them to move up it's the $1 million question. I don't have a good answer.
And that's go ahead, Don. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that's Op 36, isn't it? Operation 36 does that. That's literally what the teaching mechanism is shoot 36 and keep moving back as you get better. So you're exactly right.
Score 36 from 25 yards out. Once you score 36, you move to 50 yards out. Score 36, move to 75. It's a great way to kind of achieve success psychologically.
That's great.
It's really, really great system. That's the trick here, right? Is that's why we're all working on this, because we need the data to prove out certain theories and points. But the data doesn't necessarily motivate people to change behavior all the time, right? And so,
sure.
And then it's up to the PGA of America and NGCOA and others to say, here's how you socialize this. Here's how you try to actually get behavior to come from this data. So we're all working in this together. And why one of the reasons we had you on the show, Lou, was to say, we're trying to turn this industry from data phobes into data files, that to love data, appreciate data, so that we can do better, and because we have the data that we've never had before. So let's figure out ways to synthesize it and use it. And maybe next time, or after the Distance Insights project, the next publication of it, we'll have USGA representative on. We'll bring Lou back. We'll have a throwdown on the results and have a discussion so that we can bring everybody to the table and have a real-time discussion about the issues rather than sound bites here, sound bites there about what's happening. And let's have a real substantive discussion about it. So maybe we'll have you back on this show, Lou, and to have those conversations. Would you come back?
That'd be great, and I will be lobbying hard for a major at a 4,000 yard golf course. So whatever I need to do to support that, I'm in.
Well, that would be fun as hell just to watch. It
would be it'd be great. I would love it.
Yeah. Well, Lou, thanks a lot for being on the show. Everybody follow Lou on Twitter, the Golf Stat Pro Guy, and and chime in as golf course operators and what he's putting out there in the universe. Thanks for being on the show, Don. Good to see you again this month, and everybody at home. We'll see you in November. Take care, everyone. Thanks. Have a great day.